Hey, David, thank you so much. Hi, everyone who's been enjoying all the sessions since morning. I'm Shweta Saraf, and I'm really excited to moderate this excellent panel on scaling things and how to learn to fix things quickly. And with me today, I have Dave Burgess, who's head of data engineering at Pinterest, and we have Derrick Knudsen, who's the CTO of Alteryx. So I'll pass it on to both of you if you guys want to say some opening notes.
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's great to participate in this Spring Summit. I'm Dave Burgess, Head of Data Engineering at Pinterest. I've worked in startups, I've worked in big companies, scaling startups and also scaling organizations. And so I'm really excited to be here and chat about this topic.
Hello, Derrick Knudsen. I am the Chief Technology Officer at Alteryx. For those that aren't familiar with Alteryx, we are an analytics company who helps bring analytical capabilities to the analyst and to the data scientist. That's what our product does. I've been here for roughly two and a half years. I've spent a lot of time in the tech industry in a variety of technical roles, from CTO to tech strategy, etc. So thanks for having me. Excited for this conversation.
Great. So let's just kick it off right away. Scaling teams is always something an engineering leader has to do at various different times in their career. And the first question I want to ask Dave is, can you share with us a story when you scaled a team and what was your biggest learning?
Sure. Well, one story I have is I was a CTO of a startup and scaled up our engineering team from the first 2 engineers to a team of 20. We wanted to create a social network for marketers, so think like LinkedIn on steroids with lots of visual portfolios. And there were many challenges along the way. The major challenges for me were to hire the team, build the product, and get product market fit, which is what you need to do when you're a startup. And I have to say that I focused too much on hiring and building the product with the team and didn't spend sufficient time with our users, who are our customers. We were really building towards a vision of what we thought users would want, and didn't interview enough users to hear their true feelings about our product. We were just presuming or guessing what our users wanted, really. And this was a huge mistake. In the end, it didn't matter that we had built a top-notch team, that we had 2-week agile sprints that delivered many capabilities every sprint, had a scalable architecture, a really reliable production system. We even had growth of like 100,000 people. We needed to have a way to have more interaction with our users, to know what they really wanted and build a product that they would frequently use. So the learning for me here is that what customers want is the #1 priority. And don't try to scale your user base and your team before you get product market fit.
That's great, Dave. I definitely agree. Customer focus has to be built in when you do this. So let's turn to Derrick. Derrick, what's your take on a story you want to share with our audience today on how you scaled a team?
Yeah, sure. Dave, your story really resonates with me. I've suffered that myself. I would say Alteryx is a great story of this. I was brought in, 2.5 years ago. Company was experiencing massive growth. We have gone, when I got here, I think there was roughly 20 or so engineering teams. Today we're 40 going on 50, 2.5 years later. So pretty significant growth in a short period of time. 2 things we suffered from there. One is I didn't probably pay as much attention to ensuring that the organization was structured for the growth. I think sometimes you get so eager to bring on new people and build new teams that you forget that all those teams need to fit together. So we all suffered a little bit from Conway's Law in terms of having the things we were building reflect the structure of the organization. And so we had to get in front of kind of retooling the organizational structure. So the architecture, the product architecture we were developing was reflected in the organization model. As without that, we were getting all sorts of things like teams building the same thing twice, a feeling of competitiveness between teams. So we embraced kind of a team topologies mentality and really made sure that we created an architectural structure from an organization perspective that put that to the side. And since we've done that, it's been a lot better. And now the strain really is on the process scaling side of it, where we're continuing to try and evolve our processes to keep up with the massive growth. There is actually a quote in that Elegant Puzzle book by Will Larson that talks about for Uber when they were there, talking about how process was always 6 months behind headcount. I think we have suffered from that, where you grow so fast that your existing processes don't work anymore or your tooling doesn't work. So I think you have to be cognizant of those things as you scale the organization, or you can have a lot of individual teams running off doing things in a non-cohesive way and creating uncorrelated outcomes. And that's probably the last thing you want.
Yeah, thank you for that. You touched upon a lot of good points there, and I agree with you. Conway's law is very real, and we see that happening every time when the organizations grow too fast. So I think that was a great start. I just want to remind the audience that please keep sending your questions, because we are going to get to those in a bit. And also a quick shout out to Lohika, who is helping us co-host this panel today. So thank you for that. Okay, so let's get into it, right? I think, Dave, I want to ask you this. You touched a bit upon customer focus and how it is important, right? So tell me what happens when you have scaled your team and your team size is fixed, but now you want to scale your customer use cases or your customer focus. What are your tips to do that?
Yeah, well, the thing to realize, when you've got a fixed team size and you're trying to scale your number of customers, a bunch of things can break as you do that. Things like your production system reliability, the quality of your product, your support processes, and the speed at which you can iterate. And this really impacts your customers' happiness and your team's happiness too. So you want to make sure that your existing customers are happy and you have a product market fit before you scale the number of customers. And you want to make sure that you really have to make sure you've got the right product. And if you're fortunate that you have found the right product market fit and the product is selling like hotcakes, then the things that we focus on is make your production systems really reliable and high quality. This keeps your existing customers happy, and it keeps the amount of work that your developers are doing for support and maintenance lower. So then that creates bandwidth for your team to build new capabilities, new functionality, and onboard customers. So one of the techniques that we use for making our production systems really reliable is having a post-mortem after each production incident, where we try and find the root causes of what caused the incident, and then we fix those root causes. We use something called the 5 whys, where we ask why 5 times to get down to what those root causes are. So you also, if say you got your production systems really reliable, the quality is good, then you need to think about how you're going to support the onboarding of 2 to like 10x the number of customers, and enable your team to still be productive developing the product. So for this, you really need to create a good support structure where you have on-call shifts, where you have maybe one person that is focused on production issues, one person that's focused on onboarding if you can. And it gives the rest of the team the bandwidth to actually build the new functionality. And of course, you rotate the people, so people don't feel that they're on support all the time if you're in a small team. If you're fortunate enough to have a bigger team where you can have people full-time, then that's great. And once you have that bandwidth, then you can improve the customer onboarding process, to onboard customers faster, try and automate as much as possible.
Yeah, I guess being adaptive and investing in resiliency is super key and helps you do more with even a fixed size team. So agree with you there, Dave. Derrick, any thoughts you have on this same topic?
Great points by Dave. I'll pivot in a different direction. If you have a fixed team size, you probably have fairly fixed throughput at that point, assuming you've optimized where you can. I think what becomes really important at that point is to make sure what you're building is what your customers actually need and want. With success can come a bit of hubris in terms of, one, thinking that everything you build is going to be very valued by your customer, and 2, you get that many more vectors of input on what you should have in your product. Lots of studies have covered that 70% of features that are added to product add 0 to negative value. So if you have fixed team size, you really just can't throw more people at it and play a numbers game. If I build enough things, enough of those will be right. You have to be really precise and surgical on what you build. And that's where Dave talked a lot about product market fit, embracing things like lean software engineering or lean software development processes, especially around the product dimension of that. That's really not just the job of product, it's the job of engineering to make sure product's asking those hard questions, that they can associate actual verified customer value with the things that the engineers are being asked to build. Because if you build the wrong thing with fixed team size, you don't have the ability to make it up with capacity. So you have to be that much more thoughtful in what you put in the product. So as an engineering leader, I think that's the one thing that I hear a lot of my engineers lean away from, saying, oh, that product stuff, that's product's job to get right. At the end of the day, I think we all want to serve our customers. We all want to create products we're super proud of. So you have to lean into that. You owe it to your customers. You owe it to your shareholders if you're public, to make sure you're building value for your customers. And that would be one area that I would drive a lot of focus if I was moving to a new organization, because I've driven it here and we've seen a lot more success with our products because of it.
Yeah, that driving the focus and priorities and focusing your throughput to do that is super key. So just to build on that a bit, how do you work with product to make sure that engineering contributes to this? Like, any thoughts on that?
Well, and I think at times product can feel a little invaded by engineers asking those questions, right? Hey, have you done cost of delay analysis? Have you done a RICE product prioritization analysis? Product can feel a little bit threatened by that. But the key is making sure that intent is coming from a positive place. I would say initially for us at Alteryx, we struggled with that. Where when engineers started asking a little bit of the 5 whys question Dave talked about, that product felt threatened by those questions. But I think once the intent of the questions was better understood and the trust between product and engineering was established, it just became a way of holding each other accountable, much like we expect product on the engineering side to hold us accountable to quality. Right, they owe that to us and our customer base, just like we owe it to them and our customer base to make sure they're making smart product decisions. But it can be a bumpy road initially until that trust is really developed.
Right. I think that's a great call out to acknowledge that, and especially for leaders to work through that. So pivoting a bit on scaling, right? I'll start with you, Derrick, this time. You touched upon how organizations have to scale to match the growth in people and so on. So can you talk a bit about your approach towards scaling processes or culture as you grow your teams?
Yeah, I think scaling culture is a significant challenge, I think, especially going at such a rapid growth pace. A lot of folks who come to companies when they're smaller, they're used to operating in that very startup mentality. But as you scale, you typically have to add some level of a process framework to make sure you're consistently delivering a common outcome in a way that's measurable and understandable by your executive group or by your shareholder or by your board. And I think as you start adding process, as you scale, that can create all sorts of cultural friction within the organization. We definitely suffered from it here, moving so quickly and growing so rapidly, having to add organizational layers to it, having to add a lot of process formality, kind of evolved tool sets to support it. It felt heavy-handed to a lot of people. So what we focused on is, hey, we know change is an inevitability. We're going to have to take you through change. What we need to focus on is developing trust that we have your best interest in mind and that we're bringing you along in that change journey. So we kind of pivoted a lot on this whole, Daniel Pink idea of what motivates people around autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And we've spent a lot of time focusing on those things because the change will be inevitable. And as long as people trust that you're going to give them the types of things that motivate them around, hey, I give you autonomy to do your job. I make purpose very clear to you in terms of the vision and mission of the organization, of the products you're investing in. And I provide you skills to develop your mastery, that you're going to show patience with me as an executive as I take you through these changes. And those investments have paid off. It has not been an unbumpy road. We've had all sorts of challenges with some of the larger changes we've made, but I think because of those investments, we've seen a lot of our people stick, right? Because they trust that we're doing things that are in their best interest and in our customers' best interest. But I say focusing on those core behavioral things more than the individual changes themselves goes a long way, especially if you think you're going to be doing a lot of change.
Yeah, definitely. So, Dave, coming to you, like, what has been your experience and approach based on what we are talking about in terms of scaling process along with the culture aspect as well?
Yeah, so totally agree with Derrick that scaling a good culture is very challenging. I actually have a no assholes policy now, as I've seen cultures erode and destroyed by certain individuals. And so I tend to remove them from the organization as quickly as possible now. I think for a culture, you really need to write down what's important to your company's culture. Every company's got an individual culture. And there are cultural carriers, individuals within the organization that exemplify what you want in your team and what you want in your company's culture. And you really need to support these people and give them recognition and actively work to improve the culture of your team by listening to feedback from your team and making improvements along the way. It's a journey. And so you really need to make that as one of the important things that you focus on as you're scaling up your organization, as scaling up your company. To scale processes, you really need to think about what the biggest pain points are for your team and for your customers, and focus on creating and improving processes for these pain points. This could be like, how do we gather requirements, or how do we improve the quality of our code or product? How do we improve the reliability of our production system, or hiring? It could be many, many different things, but the key is to understand those pain points and the consequences of having a lack of standardization in an area, and then come up with the best practices to reduce, or if possible, eliminate those pain points.
Cool. So I know our audiences are having a lot of questions lining up, and a quick word on that. I agree with both of your take, and like when it comes to culture, right, you need to have those strong set of values, because you can keep going back to that and make sure those are in agreement with your company values and what your team also adopts. So with that, I'm gonna start taking up some audience questions. The first one is by Stefan. He wants to know, how are you dealing with frustration of the founders that things are getting slower than when we were smaller? When we double the team, we should ship twice as much. So,
Yeah,
when of you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. This is a tough one. Things do get slower when you're a startup and you're very agile. And I think one of the key things here is to figure out what you can stop doing, and also to figure out, well, what's the most important 20% or the top 3 things that the company should focus on. And if you can create that focus and you can stop doing the things that aren't needed, then you're generating as much bandwidth as you possibly can to go as fast as you can. So that's what I would say.
This is a painful one for me, because we just suffered from it during our scaling. You know, we added, I think, 30 people to a team in a matter of 2.5 months. So we essentially doubled the team, the size working on a product, and the same expectation from our board was, why aren't we going twice as fast? Why can't I? It's not a linear equation. It's not an equation, right? It's not a deterministic equation. And so I think what I've focused on a ton is just really the mythical man-month conversation with them, and walking them through specific data points around that to try and educate that, you know, scaling isn't linear. It's not just add more gas to the tank and you automatically go faster. It's a cooks in the kitchen idea, right? But it's a tough one. People just think if I give you more resources, I get more outcomes, and it's ratio correct. For if I give you X amount of people, I get, you know, X amount of productivity out of it. It's a really difficult one to manage. I think part of that's managing the expectation when you are hiring. To say, hey, hiring takes capacity, onboarding takes capacity, you know, getting folks ramped up so they can add value, that takes capacity and time. So it's not an instantaneous thing.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you have to go slow to go faster, right? So there is an investment there in making sure that you are actually getting benefit of all the scale that you're going through and keeping your team intact. So I guess that leads to me to the next question. Julius wants to know, how do we keep your engineers motivated while you're scaling so quickly? Because you may have mounting tech debt, or they might be stretched too thin with very tight timelines.
Yeah, good question there. I think especially as a small organization, startup, you're expected to to acquire tech debt as you find product market fit. But then when you become a mature organization and you're trying to kind of get out from underneath that tech debt, it's required because the expectation of innovation gets greater and greater. And we all know that that tech debt can be a huge limiter in terms of the innovation, the pace of innovation you can ship with. So we've had to carefully balance that. We've talked a lot more about providing work ratios for products based on their maturity. So if I've got a highly mature product that's in the market where I've kind of peaked out on that value curve and I'm just providing incremental updates to customers, we do a lot more on the technical debt, quality debt side of things. Than if I'm on a product that's net new to the market and pace needs to be quick, then we typically dial back where we spend that effort on the technical debt side. We've got a floor of around 30% for quality and technical debt, which we will do our best to hold firm to. But I think where you hold on that can depend on the maturation of the product. And if it's still acquiring that product market fit, the pace may need to be greater, and you may need to be okay, acquiring some of that debt. But there always needs to be an expectation of payoff. And that's, I think, the one thing as leaders we owe our executive team is to make sure that when we ask to have that check cashed, that they're ready to cash that debt check and do the things about it. Because then what happens is what Dave mentioned, the faster you go, the more debt you acquire, the slower your innovation goes, right? And I think you just got to keep reminding them that you eventually have to pay the piper or you can't innovate.
Yeah, I agree with Derrick wholeheartedly. I would give the same answer, really. When you're a startup, you really have to iterate fast. You're trying to find product market fit. You may have to rewrite the whole thing at some point, but you finding product market fit is the most important thing. When you're getting more mature, you spend probably about 20% of your time just maintaining and correcting the technical debt. Fixing that, doing upgrades, and a variety of other things. And if you don't do that, what happens is that part of the system will become obsolete within 2 to 3 years' time, and you'll have to do a complete rewrite, which could take you 12 to 18 months. And so you've got to keep on top of your tech debt, and as engineering managers, got to give bandwidth to your team to deal with that over time.
Yeah, I always keep asking this question to myself and my team. What is the cost of not doing this right now, right? Because down the road, you need to probably exponentially pay that cost if you don't provide a balance or put it into your capacity. So cool. This one is from Tony. He wants to know, what is the responsibility of a CTO versus that of engineering leaders when it comes to scaling? So,
good question. As a CTO, I'll give you my answer. Maybe Dave will give you the engineering answer. The job of my engineering leaders is to make sure that the execution of the engineering function scales, right? So I put a lot on them to work together to make sure like lean software principles are something we take focus on. The tooling that supports those principles is capable of scaling with us. When I first got to Alteryx, this is a little bit of a scary story. We were still on Subversion, and that was only 2 years ago, right? And so Subversion is circa 2000, 2002. And so that was a huge inhibitor for us in terms of having engineering velocity, regardless of what technical strategy or vision that I came up with. We couldn't innovate fast enough because of that limitation. So what I've tasked my engineering leaders on is really focusing on the engine of engineering working really, really well. And that's the people side of it in terms of enablement. It's the process side and the tooling that goes with it. And then it's my job to make sure that as we're coming through the organizational constructs, the technical strategy around delivering the product outcomes we're trying to deliver, that's where I try and focus my time to make sure the raw materials we're providing into the system and the machines that sit within it will allow my teams to build the software outcomes that we need them to build in a really high quality way. So that's how I've segmented at least what I ask of my engineering leaders versus what I ask of myself. But what's your answer on this, Dave?
I think it depends on the role of the CTO, because there are different kinds of CTOs.
Sure.
There are CTOs that are focused totally on the technology. They're like the Uber chief architect for a company. And there are other CTOs that are also managing all of engineering as well. So when it's someone who is focused on the technical side, it's everything that Derrick said. When it's for the folks that are focused on the people side, which is more the engineering leaders, then it's about scaling the processes that you have, scaling the organization, scaling hiring, and making sure that everyone's happy. Like they're loving the work, they're inspired, they know what the vision is, what the strategy is, and they're really, really keen to build towards that. You want to retain your engineers, especially the ones that have been with the company for a while, and the ones that are top performers. And so you need to spend a lot of time on the people side.
Definitely. I've also experienced CTOs who have a product focus in addition to engineering as well. And I think that's where also the role of engineering leaders is to look at engineering efficiency, velocity, and tech scaling. And the CTO may have a lot more focus responsibilities in general. So with that, Cindy has an interesting question. She says, you both have worked with Lohika to help scale your engineering capacity. So what lessons have you learned in terms of scaling via external engineering partners, and just both the good and the bad from it?
Yeah, so to scale really, really quickly, sometimes you do need professional services vendors like Lohika, and that gives you some ability to start things and to take over maintenance of things. So what I tried to do is for the things that are really critical in terms of IP and building new systems, I tend to have a full-time folk working on that. And then for things that we are either maintaining or we're testing or we're scaling a little bit more, then I would use a third party, such as Lohika. And Lohika has been a fantastic partner for us at Pinterest, and really enjoy working with them. You also have to select your partners really well. It's like getting married. You're going to be in a relationship for a long period of time. You might want to go through a little bit of an engagement period, test them out with one project or two projects, and hold a carrot saying that, like, if you do really well in these, then we'll give more projects to you. So treat it like a long-term relationship and make sure you have a really good partnership.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I would say trying to find go-to partners, it's a huge part of our strategy. We are very FTE focused when I got here, and I think as you need to pop scale quickly, and maybe it's a sprint for a specific thing, obviously FTE is not very flexible. So we work really hard to provide kind of a variable lever to our resourcing, and really with two dimensions. One is augmentation, but I need a resource here, I need to do a little maintenance there, it's very small. And then on this project side, on the augmentation side, I happen to work with a company that I had a lot of success with, and so that's been a huge win for us at Alteryx. I have dated a lot on the partner side, and I have not been very successful. But I would say that changed, and this is a shameless plug for Lohika. They've been fantastic partner for us. We started talking with them, I think it was last summer. And we've let them work on a couple of our projects as project teams. And our fear was we're very FTE focused, and we didn't want to create a threat to our FTEs. But they've come in and seamlessly fit culturally into the organization. They have cultural sensitivity for that dimension. And so that's been great for us. And their productivity has been outstanding. Real professional partner. So if you can find a company like Lohika that you can build trust in and have that marriage, as Dave said, that's something you want to hold on to, because I've made a million mistakes in the partner space and I'll call it burned a lot, especially when you're looking for a partner and they're a little more IT centric than they're product development centric. And developing for products and developing for projects is very, very different. You need to find that one partner and leverage it heavily. So we've got a pretty good balance today on that. In terms of we do lean hard on kind of that alternative workforce side of things, but then we also obviously invest in that core IP development with our FTEs.
Awesome. So with that, that was our last question. And indeed, it's about finding that right match, whether it's at your workplace or in your life, right? So with that, I really want to thank both Derrick and Dave, as well as Team Plato and Lohika for this wonderful session. And that's it from us. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.